President Cyril Ramaphosa says his government has committed a 1.7 trillion rand over the next 5 years into the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan. Ramaphosa was addressing Climate Resilience Symposium, which was aimed at changing climate goals into macro-fiscal and finance policies. Joining us is Motshegwa from Tshikululu Social Investment. Motshegwa, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for speaking to us. I'd like to start off with understanding what corporate social investors are before we unpack the conversation at hand.
Okay, no, thank you so much for that question. So corporate social investors actually encompass a very wide range of various social investors, but it essentially includes your corporate foundations and non-profits that are established by corporates to, deploy their CSI funds. It also includes community development trusts established by corporates as well, and the impact funds that they establish, as well as other philanthropic ventures that aren't necessarily associated to a corporate organization, but still deploy philanthropic funds.
So what are the key challenges and opportunities for corporate social investors in supporting the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan? In fact, what is that plan that they're looking to support?
Yes. Okay, great. So one, I think we use the term just transition and just energy transition interchangeably. And the just energy transition is actually a subset of the just transition, which includes all sectors and the transition of all sectors towards a net zero, low carbon economy, but that is still inclusive of people who have never really been active or included in the economy. Whereas the just energy transition focuses more on the use of energy in a sustainable way and moving towards renewable energy. And essentially, I think the challenges for corporates have been the average corporate organization doesn't necessarily have the expertise of this just transition or just energy transition in their day-to-day work. You know, if you're manufacturing furniture or selling insurance, that's not something you're looking at, but it is something that impacts you as an organization. And I think they just don't sort of understand where to get involved and how this can be done in a sustainable way that impacts them positively and the clients and the environment that they operate in positively, but also impacts the broader environment as well. And I think the other challenge is that this transition is in its nascent state, in that everything is sort of happening in silos and no one quite understands, in a consolidated view, where all the pockets are and where the gaps are. So I think corporates just don't know how they can contribute. That's the challenge. But the opportunity is that there are people who know. There's various people working on the ground, and through collaboration and partnership, it's easy to then identify which gaps there are in the just transition space and how you can slot in and add value as a corporate social investor.
Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa has committed 1.7 trillion rand over the next 5 years. It seems like a huge amount. Are those numbers big enough?
Yes, they are. They are substantial. So what we know is that initially at COP26, it was about 8.5 billion committed. And as at the end of last year, that increased by the international community to $12 billion towards this just transition. So 98 billion in dollars, that's this 1.5 trillion. There's still a significant gap to get there. And it's quite substantial, but essentially it's really a call to action for the investment community to contribute to that, so that the transition can happen in a way that is just and inclusive and equitable.
Now, how can corporate social investors ensure that vulnerable communities and workers affected by the transition away from coal are not left behind?
Yeah, so I think one is, it's important to understand that there's already work happening in this space that is facilitating things like inclusive dialogues and getting the voices of communities that will be impacted like this, getting their voices included in the conversation of the just transition. So the first thing would be to partner with those organizations and build the capacity of those on-the-ground community-based organizations so that they can do this at a much larger scale and they can be capacitated to do that. But beyond that, as a corporate social investor, you can actually invest directly in some of the key things that the Just Energy Transition Implementation Plan outlines. They outline things like reskilling to make sure that the coal worker who is impacted by, the transition away from coal can still have a job in the future, or the average other person who's never really been involved in the economy can still be part of a future where we are in this low carbon economy and there's all these new opportunities that have been unlocked. So there's various ways for them to invest, but one is partnership and two is directly investing in the pillars that are outlined by the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan.
So when President Cyril Ramaphosa talks about a plan and a huge amount of money over the next 5 years, what are the steps that will get us to a successful transition over the next 5 years? I mean, it seems like a long time, but I think we need to take into account that work needs to be done, and it needs to be done very, very quickly. Or is it going to be done quickly?
Yeah. So there's a myriad of steps that would have to be done to ensure that. But what the presidency has started is they've set out the project management unit, and they've already started working. And some of the funds that have been deployed by the international community has already started being invested in various initiatives that are aligned to that. But essentially, I think as a next step, it's definitely going to require collaboration. It's going to require consolidation as well, putting everything together. It's going to require transparency for the public to have a view, for international investors and local investors to have a view at where the opportunities are. And most importantly, for the beneficiaries who are impacted by this just transition to have a view at where funding is going, how it impacts them, and what their future looks like in this, low carbon economy that we're trying to shift to.
Now, you've raised an issue there around, regular people that may not have an understanding of what this whole just energy transition actually means. What advocacy work is being carried out or needs to be carried out? I mean, to hear their voices, because it all seems largely, I mean, when you talk about 1.5 trillion rand, then it's the sort of numbers that would skim over the heads of many individuals.
100%. So I think from an advocacy perspective, there has been a lot of people who are, who have started the climate action advocacy. But climate action advocacy is more around climate change, right? But South Africa's context is different, and that's why our just transition is different, because it's not just moving away from coal and being a coal-reliant country, which we are, from our energy mix perspective and the fact that, we export it and we're also the second largest emitter. But it's also about how do we include people who have never really quite been active in this, and move to an economy that is still low carbon, but people are included in this conversation essentially, and that's where the advocacy needs to lie, for those marginalized communities whose voices haven't necessarily been heard as part of this whole conversation, but who are directly impacted by it.
Motshegwa from Tshikululu Social Investment, unpacking for us how some of that 1.5 trillion that has been set aside by President Cyril Ramaphosa will be spent on just energy transition. Appreciate your time.